Okay, welcome everybody. All right, this is so cool. We had lots of people register, and of course not everybody always attends, but goodness, we've got a good 16 people in the room already. So that's fantastic. So for those who are new to this, we did this last year, and sort of the growing number of people got it going longer. You know, when an initiative starts off and the participants die down, sort of a thing, and it's not really inspiring to sort of keep going and sharing more, but it sort of kept on going. People were there every week, and they shared links for other people to come and start enjoying it, and so that spurred us all on to sort of keep going. So last year we actually went for 5 months. And people sort of glued to their screens absorbing this, which is great. So anyway, I'll make a start. The intention of these sessions is to keep them sort of short. I will fail at that miserably today, as in I want to give you a bit of a general overview of who we are and the subject of EMF radiation and the effects on health and home, and real short introduction to mitigation. So we've sort of quickly covered all little details included. And then after that, we're going to go into more detailed sessions, which we'll keep really short. So we'll do a couple of slides, let's say, that we'll discuss from the professional training, and then we see you, again, the week after. If this time doesn't suit you so well, I'm actually doing this twice every day. I do it as in, it's my Tuesday, I'm in Australia, so I do it in my morning, 6 a.m. and I think 6 p.m. in the evening. So there is another session where I'll do this, which might suit you better time-wise. Anyway, cool. So let me actually pause this for a second. Or stop that. Yep. Okay, where have you guys gone? Oh, here you are. Sorry, just getting my bearings. I don't normally use the webinar system so much because you don't get people's faces on the screen. How do I unlock this thing? No, lock webinar. All right, well, I might just keep that window here. All right, cool. So we have a chat window or chat ability, and also Q&A. I'll go into that in a minute. I'd love you to write in chat sort of where are you from. That's always interesting to know, as in how spread are we across the globe at this time. So please put that in chat. Also joining us today is one of our consultants, Alan Cheney, who's also monitoring the chat whilst I'm talking, sort of a thing, and I might be able to answer some quick questions. And we have also Q&A. So if you have a question that you don't want to sort of get lost in chat, you can put it in chat is disabled, says Khalid. Thank you for that. How do I change that? Go on then. Everyone, now it should work. Does it work now? Yay, there it is. Cool. Sorry about that. All right, awesome. Cool. Linda, Fiona, you were here last time. Karen, Dallas, awesome. Romania, Maria's is there. Khalid, Saudi Arabia, salam alaikum. Okay, Claudia's in the UK. This is great. And with these events, we're not really recording them. well, I'm recording them. We'll see what we do with that, but we're not going to record every session and sort of make replays available. So you sort of have to be there to to absorb it all. So I'm looking to the side because I've got like 3 monitors going here, which is great, having all this space for Windows. Okay, Clearwater, Rosemary, awesome, Las Vegas, Mary, North Carolina, Maria, UK, Stockholm, Carl, awesome, welcome. This is great, thanks so much. All right, really appreciate it. Also, we're going to try and figure out to do a little bit of a roll call sort of a thing. And maybe, I mean, now that you've introduced yourself, we have a chat history, we can see who was sort of here at the beginning. We want to do something with that, as in sort of keep track of who comes every week or the most, let's say, and we'll organize some little rewards to be here. All right, cool. So I'll get started with the chat. I'm a typical boy. I can only do one thing at a time. So I might not see things that are flying past in the chat. Actually, chances are I won't see it. So that's why it's good Alan's here. Q&A is better. If you have, let's say, a formal question that you want to answer, you can put that in there. And then one little housekeeping rule is that these sessions, we try and stay on topic. Today's a bit general, so I'm expecting general questions. But let's say next week we might go into how electricity makes radiation. So to ask questions about shielding paint, for example, that would not be on topic. So we stay on topic, otherwise we get lost and it starts getting really big and out of control. All right, cool. Let me fire this thing up. Cool. Just clean those. Oh, Azul's here from Italy. Cool. All right, remember, just put general chat in chat, and any specific questions about what we're covering, put that in Q&A. That'd be great. Also, just whilst we're here, how do we do this? Polls. Sorry, it's been too long. I've used this. All right, well, we'll do that next time. I was just curious. Anyway, I'll ask you next time. Okay, share screen. Here we go. That one you saw already. All right, so a little introduction. My name is Patrick Vandenberg. I'm the director of GeoVital International. GeoVital is originally a naturopathic health clinic in Austria. We started, and this year is actually our 40th anniversary. We started a long time ago, and as far as we know, we're the only people in our industry that actually came to this whole story from working with patients. Sure, some people claim they might do that now, and they've done that for a year or something. So we've actually been doing it for 40 years. As for myself, I look after GeoVital's interest outside Europe. I do a lot of I do all the English training basically, and I travel the world, fairly extensively, helping ordinary families and corporate high flyers, and even royalty, as you see in the picture at the moment. All right, so there's a GeoVital website, which you can find at en for English, en.geovital.com. And there's also my own website, which was started because I have a podcast channel, which I've neglected terribly. It is healthstronghold.com, which is also where the international shop is housed and where you can book courses and so on. Okay, so these webinar series, why am I doing this? Why am I sharing so much information? Well, I suppose, to share and enable people to do things. But quietly, I'm sort of also hoping to ignite a spark in you that, hey, this stuff is interesting. It's not that difficult, really. And that you could have a very positive impact in the world in your community. We are desperate for more consultants. We're spread very thin. There's countries where we don't have any people. Our consultants travel a lot. I travel a lot. I've just actually yesterday come back from a 5,200 and something kilometer trip up and down the east coast of Australia doing assessments. To put that in reference is in terms of distance. That's from driving from Florida to Montreal and back. Or for those who that doesn't mean anything to, if you're from Asia, it's driving from Kuala Lumpur to New Delhi. That's in terms of distance traveled. Yeah, so we need more people, and so it would be great if this information, gets you excited to perhaps, do our formal training, because of course we're sharing a lot, but this doesn't certify you, and we don't cover everything, even though we cover a whole lot. Hopefully you'll want to engage with us more formally. All right, so as I mentioned, in relation to these sessions, questions, we were going to want to keep it on topic for what we're covering that day. So today we're going to go a little bit wide, so happy to take wide questions, let's say. We want to, of course, be respectful and polite, and we don't want to discuss sort of other brands, negative things, organizations or other consultants. Let's keep it on topic. Okay, cool. So let's do a little introduction. GeoVital Academy, as I mentioned, it's got a 40-year history. These are the buildings that we have in Austria. So it's quite impressive when you get there. It's a large setup. So the building on the left, down the bottom is where the clinic actually sits. Then on top is where our offices are and training facilities are, and the classrooms and so. And then in the building on the right, the bottom windows, you could say, is where we do, sorry, does it work? Yeah, bottom sessions where the mattresses are put together, our toxin-free mattresses, which are part of our approach. And then above that is, let's say, our mental health sort of wing, let's say, marriage counseling, group counseling, those sorts of things. All right, so a little bit of history, and I'm apologizing for speeding this up, but I got about 80 slides to go through, so let's get at it. All right, so GeoVital started in 1982, basically when the Haanen family was confronted with a terminal breast cancer diagnosis. The doctors had given up, and Werner Haanen, bless him, the father of the family, he was a sailor at heart. And when you're a sailor, that comes with a particular attitude, as in when it comes to dealing with problems. So what does that mean? Well, when you're in a car and your car breaks down, you pull over, you call roadside assistance, or you walk somewhere and you get help, right? When you're out of the Atlantic, doesn't happen, right? You have to fix it with what you have on board. And so when the doctors gave up with, get your affairs in order, we can't save your wife, he had the same attitude. Is all right, well, if you can't fix it, how can I? What have I got on board? What can I do? And so he came up with the idea to organize a symposium in Montfort Castle on the shores of Lake Constance. And he invited as many people as he could who had an alternative view to dealing with cancer. And radiation, geopathic stress kept coming up in these conversations. And that's really what got GeoVital started. Rosita, the mother, by the way, still around today. So that plan really paid off. All right, so going forward into the future, so a lot of research and development is done for geopathic stress, and also, of course, electronic pollution. And there's quite a few solutions invented by us, and also some solutions invented by people that came out of that initial group, as in mastermind groups were formed by people who had a similar interest, and sort of stuck their heads together. So if it hadn't been for Werner's meeting, that might have never happened. An example of that are the circuit cutoff switches, for example. They came from that meeting. All right, we started training people very early on. So this is a photo from France, where we're teaching a whole group of complementary health practitioners. And we just early on knew that we can do a great job in helping people with houses, but it's just us, let's say. So if we can enable other people to help their community, then we can help a lot more people, the ripple effect that you sometimes hear about. All right, bottom photo is actually the first academy, let's say. It wasn't actually called GeoVital at the time. It was called the Terra Institute. And it was kind of, we think, the very first multimodality clinic that ever existed. As in, we had multiple practitioners in there, multiple modalities, so all working together and referring patients amongst each other where appropriate. Okay, so yeah, first book got published, the cutoff switch was developed, then our therapy mattresses came into being, which are anti-static and metal-free, toxin-free, gorgeous things. We had solutions for geopathic stress in '86, which was a big thing for us. We developed construction mats, so they could be submerged within the flooring of new built homes, which is really cool. Then a little jump into the future. So then, more, the mobile phone tower got introduced, the beeper first, you might remember. So yeah, moving forward, we then started developing shielding paint, and that's how T98 came to be, and using Professor Pauli's expertise in testing and using the facilities of the German Armed Forces also for testing and stuff. So, around about that time, T98 became available. GPA shielding mesh came into existence, and the Nova shielding fabric. Okay, so we use independent testing to verify the effectiveness. We can test in-house, but anything we publish, we use a third party for. This is a pain point for me in our industry, where we're surrounded by people who do their own testing, like Volkswagen and the emission scandals, and publish their own graphs that have beautiful, straight, smooth lines, which does not appear in testing. It's all self-made, created stuff, which especially testing, and we'll get into that, how to sort of read these test reports down the track, but it's very easy to be deceived. I've been in a room with 40 people that were already doing home assessments. This was in the United States. And I had to explain to people how you read decibels and how you can distinguish between one product and another. If somebody tells you how many decibels performance a product gives you, but they don't tell you the frequencies, you don't know anything. If you think that if you get 3 decibels more from 30 to 33, let's say, that you get 10% more shielding, you couldn't be further off. It seems easy to interpret, and it's not. Anyway, you can hear me going, I always get frustrated talking about this because it's so easy to get deceived. And shielding effectiveness is not the only thing that you need. You actually need the product to be healthy. And that's where, you need patience to benchmark that against. Anyway, I'm, Alan knows, I'm getting all excited. Okay, so we might skip a little video on Sulzberg, but I'll get too long. I might do that another time. So with health, there is lots of things you can do to improve your situation. And the experience we have is that there are 3 subjects that have the single biggest impact on our health clients, on our patients, if we optimize their sleeping environment for these issues. So we're not saying that water quality is not important. We're not saying that air quality is not important. What we're saying is that these 3 things have the single biggest impact in our experience. And so there's electronic pollution, as in effects of man-made radiation. So there's electricity, electric fields, magnetic fields, and of course, radio frequency radiation that you get from transmitters. Geopathic stress, which is excesses of natural radiation. And then thirdly, the mattresses that people sleep on, because you're in such close contact with it for so long of your day, and your spine is part of your central nervous system. So all of that sort of comes together. And so in our focus, yes, when we go into somebody's house, we look at their daytime areas, we look at their home office, and we give them lots of ideas, but inevitably the focus goes to the bedroom, because the bedroom is where your body rests, or anybody's body rests and regenerates. We almost exclusively only repair at night. And so it is absolutely sound logic that the bedroom must be perfect. You hear a lot of people, worrying about things in their lives, radiation exposure that we get throughout our lives, and it is a worry. But if you're going to do anything about it, you should start in your bedroom first, because we're sort of meant to wear during the day, and we repair and prepare for the next day whilst we sleep. And so any improvement, any investment should be done in the bedroom first to get that right. And so that also, if there's any complementary therapists in the room, oh, Alan, we should ask that next time, how many complementary therapists are in the room. This underpins what you're doing with any other health modalities, right? If you're a nutritionist, helping somebody create a healthy sleeping environment helps their digestion, their uptake of nutrients, and so on. If you're a massage therapist, having the body repair better at night, that gives you better outcomes with the other thing that you're doing. So it underpins everything else. So it's very base level stuff, sort of. All right, so won't go into mattresses with too much detail, but just sort of introduce the subject. As I mentioned, we're sort of touching on everything today real quick. So mattresses are often filled with chemicals and toxins because they're made really fast and really cheap. And this can cause not only allergic reactions, which is labeled as or defined as a violent reaction, like a rash, but more so intolerance reaction. So you have an energetic reaction, which basically exhausts you, makes you tired. So you wake up more tired than you need to. There's metal in mattresses that attracts radiation from transmitters. It's like a big antenna, literally. It propagates electric fields from the wall, which we'll get into. Electric fields is like the unknown, the hidden EMF that very few people know about, and almost everybody has it in their house. And the metal itself can also be magnetic. And now you have a magnet near you, and that is actually a stress signal to your body, which taxes your adrenals. And that's why, those magnetic underlays, inlays in your shoes, bracelets, all that sort of stuff that was sold in sort of the magnetic therapy hype. They tend to have short-term benefit on account of taxing the adrenals, but once they're exhausted, you're further away than where you started. So you don't want to introduce new signals into your environment. You are going to get closer to nature, right? So yeah, we want to remove things from our sleeping environment, not give new things to deal with other things. Doesn't make any sense. Static charge buildup is present with modern mattresses, not only from friction between you and the mattress, but also from resonating with phone tower radiation. So we want mattresses that are anti-static. Most mattresses have poor oxygenation to the skin, and your lungs might be your number one breathing organ, but your skin is your second breathing organ. And if you can put your mouth on your mattress and it's hard to breathe, let's say, out into your mattress doesn't breathe very well. And so things like memory foam mattresses is like a plastic bag. It just seals off the skin. Terrible idea. Many natural materials can unfortunately be a breeding ground for bacteria and fungus, so that doesn't work so well, and there might be intolerance issues with them. Poor spinal support, although that's the thing a lot of manufacturers will work on. And often mattresses are too rigid for when we sleep on our side, and all of us roll around. Covers can't be washed, which is a bit disgusting. And then there's, of course, many marketing gimmicks like silver in mattresses, which is a stupid idea. As in, silver is a natural antibiotic, but it doesn't distinguish between good or bad bacteria either. And we are an enormous amount of beneficial bacteria that we have a symbiotic relationship with. So to sleep on silver is not a great idea. And the word natural really doesn't mean anything, as in uranium is natural too, plutonium, we don't want to sleep on that either. So something can be natural, but might not actually be good for you. All right, moving on to geopathic stress. That's excesses of natural radiation. This is a fascinating subject. Some countries are full on into this. Culturally, Germany knows a lot more about it. Also, the Indians are full on into it, as in India. They call it Vastu over there. So you have natural cycles with water, for example. Water comes down in rains, goes through the soil, gets to layers that are not so permeable, and then starts flowing on that layer. Drags trace elements with it, piece of zinc, piece of copper, that meets the water, allows it to react with each other. And you get a similar sort of idea as having a piece of aluminium touching an amalgam filling. If you've got those, get that horrible electrical feeling in your mouth. And so that creates a gentle energy coming up from that area, which stresses us and burdens us. So this has been around a long time. And so we used to sort of adjust where we sleep. Let's say in a cave, you might have a bundle of hay and you'd move it to a different corner if you didn't have a good night's sleep. But now we have our bedrooms allocated. We have 2 power outlets sitting there. You park your bed in the middle, and then it's pick a side, honey. And that's about your side, your ability to choose where you sleep. So this affects us more so now. There's grid lines. We'll go into all this stuff later. Fault lines, similar sort of dynamic with different metals and minerals, and so on. All right, so today we're going to focus more so on sorry, I just want to have a quick look. Cool, 23 people already. Awesome. Thanks. The latecomers, please put your name and, or not your name, but where you're from in the chat so we can keep a little eye on who was here. We're trying to sort of maintain a roll call so we know who's attending. We'll do that at the beginning of the meetings. All right, so with man-made radiation, let's have a look at that for today in a little bit more detail. So we like to keep our terminology simple. There's a tendency in this industry to get complicated. And well, that's really impressive when you come in and you've got lots of difficult words to use. But when you go into somebody's house who, knows a little bit about it, knows it's a problem, but doesn't know so much, then, well, you're more confusing them than anything else. As in, well, you sound really impressive. It sounds like you know what you're talking about, but they don't understand you. And the end result of that is that when people are confused and then you don't keep it simple, they don't make any changes. And that's the frustrating thing about being a consultant. I mean, I'd say a consultant in any field, that people will pay you money to get advice and then not use it, not implement it. And I know there's consultants in our industry that they think that if they do 10, 20 assessments in a month, that they did a great job. Well, no, not really. As in, how many of those people made changes in their life? And that is often very low. And so we do get, people trained by other sort of schools actually come to us because they hear that we've got this sort of figured out. And they say, listen, I know I do a great job. I know my stuff. I've got thousands of dollars worth of equipment to build up. I know I can do a good assessment. I know I can pull that place upside down and tell them, what's amiss. But if I do 20 assessments, if one person makes any changes, I'm doing well. And that's not why I'm in this industry. I was here to help people. And I'm failing miserably at it because 19 people are still in the exact same environment as when I got there. So anyway, we recognize this, that it's not about how many assessments you do, it's about how many lives you change. All right, people need to understand so they can start implementing changes. So we keep our terminology simple. That's what I'm trying to get at. So for radio frequency radiation, we just call that radio frequency radiation or high frequency radiation. In that category is basically everything that travels through the air without wires. So there's phone towers, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, airport navigation systems, radar, all that sort of stuff. Then on the other flip of the coin, you got low frequency radiation. And you heard that word, it has to do with electricity. So it's the power supply going from the power station to the cities, from the cities to the suburbs, through the street, to the meter box, your smart meter, your wiring in your wall, your solar panels, all that sort of stuff. That's all low frequency radiation that gives off. So examples of that are, just power stations, solar, and so on. So if we look at a bedroom setup, we have wiring that runs through the walls. That has voltage in it, as we'll go into. That throws out an electric field that comes out about 2 meters. And we park our often metal-filled mattress against the wall, and we go and lie in that 2-meter field. And so 50, 60 times per second, that field comes out and just irritates us to no end. And you try and sleep in that, or your client, your family members are trying to sleep in that. And we expect the body to do an optimal job restoring. And it's just, it's a big ask. So in our industry, we see electric fields as having the biggest impact on our sleep quality. Okay, cool. I see a little question. Sorry, I'm looking quickly sideways to the Q&A. So Paul just put in a question. I see Alan's just working on that. All right, so in the average bedroom, we got plenty to fix, right? As in we got wiring in the wall, they got the bedside lamps plugged in, there's more wiring. Goodness forbid, they might have one of those lamps that you can touch and they go on and you touch and they go brighter and so on. You know them, very pretty lamps, but terrible idea. A massive transformer in there, big magnetic field. I mean, radio alarm clocks often give people reoccurring headaches. That's actually why I got into this industry, because I had that. So yeah, plenty for us to fix. All right, let's move on. Again, I'll try and keep the speed up, and this session will be a bit longer than future sessions, so bear with me. All right, so there is thousands of peer-reviewed research studies on the effects of electronic pollution, and the majority of those studies indicate harm. Any doctor who would give it time and an open mind to actually look at it would have to come to the conclusion that we have a problem here. And so anyway, there's an enormous amount of research. I'm not going to go into all of that. This is just a short list. I mean, goodness, this list is like 10, 12 years old when I put this together. It was just a few research studies that just stuck with me. And when you delve into it, you'll have your own little short list of certain things that just spoke to you, as in they just stuck in your head. And often it is this little short list that you might discuss with somebody when they say, really? Our phone's a problem, right? And you say, well, right? And you have your little short list handy. So you're just a couple of mine. So breast cancer and melatonin, there's a study that indicates that melatonin is affected in its natural anti-cancer action. And when we're exposed to as low as 2 milligauss worth of magnetic field exposure. And I will go into fields and strengths and that sort of stuff. But the government limit in a lot of countries is 1,000 milligauss. So this is like 1/500th of the allowable government exposure. And here we have a study highlighting melatonin being affected. And that's our cleanup crew at night. Anyway, let's move on. Tamoxifen is a popular breast cancer medication that is rendered useless with a particular level of magnetic field. Cell phone usage, looking at semen analysis and as in sperm quality in a male fertility clinic. They asked people, how much exposed to phone do you have? To, what was it, 0 to 2 hours, 2 to 4 hours, 4 to 6, and so on. And it matched perfectly. The more exposure they had to cell phone, the worse the sperm samples were. And other studies come to similar conclusions. There's lots of, or not lots, but there's multiple large studies on childhood leukemia and magnetic fields, how when we're exposed to about 4 milligauss, we get more cases of childhood leukemia. Now that's not so frequent you bump into that, but you bump into it enough. This study was about radar being introduced in a town where before they had so many cases of autism, as in, I can't remember the exact number, forgive me, I think it was 10 in 100,000 or something. Then it dramatically increased. And now this is old research. We now know that, with autism, I think the figures at the moment are like 2 kids in 42 have autism, right? It's out of control. And between you and me and the lamppost, we've shielded bedrooms of kids, done nothing about anything else in their life, as in if they were on medication, they stayed on medication. If they were doing this, nothing changed. The only thing we did was introduce T98 shielding paint on the walls and shield them from phone tower radiation. And in some of those houses, the parents would tell, the next day they'd call us up and go, that's a different kid, right? I mean, there's so much going on. We are electrical beings, and all this stuff interferes with it. All right. There's a research on effect on plants, and electrohypersensitivity is also being researched. How people can be affected and more sensitive to that. I'm sure there's a few people in the room today who know this all too true. All right. So here are some of the problems. So if we're looking at brainwave activities, in the middle is what it looks like when there's no disturbances. When we have voltage nearby, then the brainwave activity already changes. When we put the Wi-Fi on, it also changes, right? We are electrical beings. Our bodies function electrically and chemically. And so this stuff is a problem for us. All right, so when we look at air values, air measurements of radio frequency radiation, you can do that. We don't tend to do it so often in assessments because we're more interested in assessing the body. But if we look at air values, you could measure that in microwatts per square meter. In a lot of countries, the exposure standards are incredibly high, often also because they didn't know who to ask, what to set them at, so they asked industry, the people that make the phone towers, what the level should be. So that's why we got in a bit of trouble, but it's set typically very high. And so there's lots of research studies at much lower levels than that that shows you all these health interactions. And so that's, yeah, that's just incredibly disturbing. And then down the bottom, the Salzburg precautionary values. And some people think Salzburg is in Austria. Some people think that Austria has very low exposure to cell phone towers, and so because of the Salzburg precautionary values. The Salzburg work group was actually a group of doctors that came together and looked at all this data, and they made a recommendation of what our exposure should be. This was not government sort of endorsed or government implemented at all. We have the same problems in Austria that we have everywhere else. So anyway, a little bit hard to read because we got this from another slide. But anyway, they recommend our exposure should be 0.1 microwatt per square meter. Right, so you see the problem, right? Now, and the ironic thing is, at this level of exposure, cell phones will still work optimally. Right, so we're exposed to so much of it because it's just cheaper to put up big, strong towers and fewer of them than, you know, let's say more towers with very little radiation. All right, so yeah, this is, you know, our body working electrically. The cells actually have an amperage, be it very little, of course, and a voltage. And so we don't want things to interfere with that. We have an awful lot of nerve pathways that use direct current to communicate and relay information. So yeah, we are very much electrical. Okay, this is what we call illness picture. So here are some sort of things related to electronic pollution, and these are some things which are more typical to geopathic stress. Again, I apologize. I have to keep the speed up because we've got so much to cover, and I'm appreciative of your time. So yeah, our little stab at conventional medicine, I guess, that, you know, you have to draw your own conclusions, but typically when you walk into an average doctor's office, you describe the symptom, they work out which fixes the symptom, and then you get a cream for it, let's say, as in you go, I've got a rash, and they go, all right, here's a steroid cream, that'll take care of it. Well, why did you get the rash? Well, they don't go that far, right? But they know this cream fixes that. I mean, this is, of course, a generalization, but in general, I think a lot of people would say that conventional medicine fights symptoms, right? If you have reoccurring headaches, very few doctors will ask you what your diet is like or how much water you drink, right? And you know, depending on the country, and I hear a lot of complaints from doctors, because there's, of course, also fantastic doctors that look beyond what they were taught, more integrative doctors, and they're absolute treasures. You know, we get information from them because we work with a number of those, of course, that, you know, governments are really pushing prescribing. If you don't prescribe at the end of an appointment, you have to justify why you didn't prescribe anything. I mean, how wrong is that, right? Anyway, moving on. So, yeah, with natural medicine, complementary medicine, you tend to look a little deeper, as in, why do you have headaches? You know, what are you drinking? What are you eating? That sort of stuff. You could argue that environmental medicine, or, you know, what we're doing, trying to change the environment, that goes a level deeper still, as in, why is your body not able to absorb those medicines or that nutrient, let's say, and work on how your body is resting and sleeping. And there's many developments in the world, especially around children, where we're slowly getting more sort of warnings and rules in place, as in cell phones can't be sold to children or advertised to children, that sort of stuff. We certainly see a development with that as well. The smart meter introduction did a lot for awareness, and 5G took it to a whole new level. We are far more involved with, I mean, we were always already, but in shielding entire homes, not just bedrooms. And also larger projects like these apartment buildings, where there were 9 apartment buildings, 42 apartments in each, if I remember correctly, and we shielded all of them. That was in Germany, close to home for me. This is in New Zealand, prototype hemp home built by our friends at Hemtech, and big tower nearby. And so that's how we sort of got together and still work together. To provide shielding to people building hemp homes. And yeah, their prototype home, when it was eventually sold, the real estate agent commented that there had never in the history of the agency been that much interest in one particular property. So it was really cool. Cool. Also, we do some work. This is a magazine, Global Briefing, reports on trends in the world. We did some work with an Austrian hotel. Hoteliers start to realize that some people don't want Wi-Fi. And so in this hotel and others, we've created shielded rooms that people can have to sleep in and have a nice regenerative sleep. Cool. Anyway, the slide you saw at the beginning is sort of summary of lots of health issues that are linked to electronic pollution. Okay, thank you for bearing with me. Kind of want to get all this stuff out of the way so we have a clear slate for next week. All right, so where is this slide not turning up? Okay, here we go. So for man-made radiation, we're going to look at radio frequency radiation, magnetic fields, electric fields, and quickly dirty electricity as well. Okay, so radio frequency radiation. Now, looking at this picture, not an awful lot to notice, but we got this big bulging weird thing in the middle there. That's a cell phone tower. They're getting more and more clever about hiding these things. I recently had a discussion with somebody who actually installs phone towers, and he half knows of all the issues involved with it, but it's his job. He works in electronics, and it's his boss gets into phone tower installations. And basically the punchline was, you have no idea what we are hiding these things in. Right? You might be in an exhibition building and there's some pillars around you holding the roof up. One of those pillars can have a cell phone tower in it. You have no idea. I mean, we know that they put them under manhole covers in the street. That came out years ago already. So they're putting more and more of these transmitters to keep more and more data access. Also, not so much a good example in this picture, but especially in the CBD areas, big tall buildings, they actually project the radiation against the building to get a bounce off effect and reach areas that are hard to reach. So if you're in that building, you're being blasted at to get to another point, it just brings up your exposure more and more. Okay, on the disguising, this is a bit of a Where's Wally sort of picture. And so here on the church, we've got these cell phone towers all nicely disguised in a brick pattern. Also, power companies often team up with telecommunications companies. So you see a combination of transmission lines and phone towers. So they don't have to put a tower up. The real estate is already there, as in the tower. And yeah, you see a lot of, I mean, as if these things weren't bad enough already for the nearby residents, but now there's a tower on those things as well. Just what I've often heard is people do training with us and they go, you know what, the world's changed since I've done this course. I see this stuff everywhere now because I'm paying attention. What I want to draw your attention to here is a little round dish. I hope you can see my pointer there. So the vertical panels, that's actually what communicates to your phone, let's say. Now these panels are getting shorter with 5G and much more intense, actually. But anyway, that's not my point now. This little dish here, that's a directional antenna. And so that's where the cell phone tower can get its information from. Every cell phone tower has electricity connected to it, but not necessarily data, right? You see a cell phone tower in the middle of the forest, there's no cable that runs there to provide the phone calls and the internet to that tower. They get that from another tower, who gets it from another tower, and eventually makes itself to let's say a central point where the information or the satellite connection actually comes from. And so these directional transmitter are a big problem, as we'll see. This is another Where's Wally picture. That chimney is actually the tower over there. All right, this is Queensland, near SeaWorld. So here we've got this lousy excuse for a palm tree. The Americans do that a lot better. I've also seen them hidden in cactuses in the warmer states. All right, so here we see these round drums again. And so in this picture, sort of highlights, okay, well, wow, it must be a terrible place to live here, sort of a thing, right? Well, these vertical panels certainly would be getting this house, even though they're sort of aiming at distance. They're not trying to radiate just down below. They'll get that anyway because they're so close. But you got these round drums here. So, wow, that looks impressive. Must be a bad place. Well, yes, but maybe not why you think. These round drums, they communicate with other towers much further away, right? But as the signal leaves, it's quite concentrated, right? It just comes out, trying to reach the other dish on the other end. Now, that field actually gets wider and smaller and wider and smaller. And so you might think that it's sniper technology trying to hit that other little dish 10, 20, 30 kilometers away, but it's actually shotgun technology. Oof, you know, can get a lot wider. So this house here is not necessarily radiated. I mean, yes, by those, but not necessarily radiated by these big round drums, but it's hit by the ones trying to communicate to these round towers, right? So you're sort of standing there looking at, oh, bad phone tower, but you're actually being hit in the back by the dishes trying to talk to it. Does that make sense? So you get this sort of situation, right? You can be caught in a crossfire right in the middle. And we've had clients like this, reoccurring health issues. We assess it, levels are too high. They shield the bedroom themselves, as most people do. And 2 weeks later, phone call, headaches are gone, right? This stuff happens all the time. Or, you know, here you got two buildings. And so you're looking at this tower, but you're actually being hit in the back from the other one. And of course, all this stuff happens at the speed of light. You know, you make a phone call, all that stuff goes through. And, you know, we're all sort of part of the problem. I mean, I'm sure there's a couple of people in here who don't have a cell phone, but most of us do. A lot of people have Netflix or similar sort of services, and that runs on data, right? We want our movies to play, and we have a high definition television, and so we want our streaming to be high definition, right? And so we need better, quicker data systems. If you have Netflix, and sometimes you see the spinning wheel of death, as in it needs to buffer, right? That is an indication to you that your data provision in your area is already not cutting the mustard anymore. It's time for an upgrade, right? And that's why 4G came, right? And that's why 5G came. And that's why 6G is already in development, and we should have it by about 2030. I actually think it'll be here much sooner, because even in areas where 5G is active, they're already running out of speed. And so that is, this development is not necessarily driven by the telephone companies. Is it driven by the consumer? It's driven by our greed for data. We get a 4K TV, and now we want to stream in 4K, right? It just keeps going. Also in part because we don't know that this stuff is harming us, right? If you pack up a packet of cigarettes, there's a good chance you know that that is a pretty serious health risk. But when you pick up your cell phone, not everybody have a similar reaction. All right, anyway, the technology for a lot of communication stuff gets cheaper and cheaper. This is air fiber, a screenshot from a couple of years ago. But you know, for about $2,000, you can buy a system like that. You buy two of them, you put one on your house, one on your office, and you can beam 24 gigahertz data connection, private connection across town. And 24 gigahertz is a frequency that is not licensed, so anybody can use it. There's a few frequencies like that. And technology is now catching up to take full advantage of those. So it's just getting worse. Anyway, this is sort of how the radiation of a cell phone tower, let's say, beams out. So you got a main beam that's actually going for distance. So let's say if you have a client's house that's here, it's actually possible to walk to the back of the house and get more radiation than to the front, because the tower is not going for right in front of it. It's going for distance. It will have these sort of side shoots coming off, and so there can be hot spots. So yeah, that does happen. I normally have some pretty slides on trees and stuff being affected, but I'm going to skip on those to keep up time. All right, so high frequency radiation, some examples. Phone towers is sort of your major contributors. Smart meters, though, we have to touch on those. Smart meters aren't actually that powerful when it comes to radio frequency radiation. Baby monitors are worse. So anyway, then why are so many people complaining after a smart meter installation? Headaches, ringing ears, heart palpitations are common sort of symptoms. How come, right? If the radiation isn't actually that strong, as it's similar to a cell phone or a Wi-Fi router sort of a thing, then why all these complaints? Well, I think that's because they were introduced so quickly. You might remember the introduction of the cordless phone, right? I remember our neighbors had one. They could make a phone call in the backyard. That was pretty cool, right? And so, but we didn't have that. We still had the telephone with the cable on it, right? Which was actually perfectly fine. I mean, you remember, having a phone call from your girlfriend or something upstairs, right? I'm taking it upstairs, Mom. Can you put the phone down, right? Because you didn't want anybody listening on your phone call, right? And if you heard a little click, then you knew your sister was listening in, right? You remember that, but it worked, right? There was no problem with it, really. But it was sort of, well, it sounds pretty handy to be able to make a phone call in the garage or, in the backyard. So cordless phone, interesting. And so, then on a holiday or something, in our case, we went to Spain and you had all these electronic shops. That's where I got my first Walkman from one year, right? And God, I'm old. And, then cordless phones were there, right? And then, my dad was negotiating on one. And anyway, so he thought he bought himself Panasonic. And then we got it in the hotel room. And then we looked at the branding, it was a Panasonic, right? It's ripped off. And anyway, so the introduction of these things was slowly. Our neighbors had one. 6 months later, we had one, right? And so if it affected health in any way, it's very hard to notice that. Where the smart meter was introduced so fast to so many homes, all of a sudden, people started talking. What, headaches, you too, ringing ears, right? People started noticing. Here in Australia, Victoria, a political party was even formed to try and stop or reverse the introduction of the smart meter. So, of course, very, very little effect. Some states, it's not compulsory to have these things. If that's the case, you don't want one. I mean, you can shield against them relatively easily, but we shouldn't have to. So anyway, what this highlights, and that's the moral of this little story, and we had another client inquiry actually this week where I explained this to one of our sort of more junior people. I use a GPS setting on a phone and I get a headache, or when I drive a car, I get a headache, or since the smart meter was introduced, I have heart palpitations or whatever. Let's say that your body can have a perfect state of health. Everything's perfectly the way it should be, right? Let's say that is here. I'm trying to see where my hands are on the monitor, right? So let's say perfect health is over here. And then we do things to ourselves, right? We drink the wrong stuff, we eat the wrong stuff, we breathe the wrong stuff, we're exposed to radiation, all the stuff that we can do to ourselves. And so our body moves away from a perfect state of health. But we don't notice because our body is maintaining balance. It's compensating, which is called homeostasis, balance, fancy word for it. All right, so we move away from the perfect health picture and our body's able to maintain homeostasis and we don't notice, right? The body's keeping all the balls in the air to keep everything functioning the way it should. But that comes to an end. You come to a point where your body has got so much to deal with, so much to compensate that it can't no longer compensate. And as soon as you go past that point, that's when you get a symptom. That's what a symptom is, the body telling us that it can no longer maintain homeostasis. So if you get a smart meter introduced, or you use a particular feature on your phone, or any sort of one thing that you say, that's odd, that gives me headaches, we would hear that you got all the way here before the introduction of this last little stressor, and that little stressor took you there, right? So yes, maybe if you take that one stressor out of your life, you move back and now the symptoms disappear. Are you healthy? Not so much, right? You got a lot more going back to do. So yeah, that sort of explains that, if a simple smart meter triggers health issues, there's a lot more going on in that bedroom that we should be investigating and fixing. All right, so there's lots of personal devices, of course, that use radio frequency radiation, mobile phones, of course, endlessly, computers, tablets, cordless phones, baby monitors, fitness monitors, which is a bit funny because radio frequency radiation is linked to triggering an increase in blood pressure. And so you got your health monitor on your wrist or on your finger monitoring your blood pressure, and it's actually increasing it. So it makes a little sense. I mean, these things can be useful to learn from, but they're not something you want to wear the whole time. As you'll hear me say a few times, it's no need to be paranoid about this stuff either. You just deal with it where it matters, and that's that bedroom. There's also toys. Hello Barbie got introduced a few years ago, which is a Barbie doll that kids can talk to, uses Wi-Fi to get answers, and then it talks back at you. Of course, very ill idea from a radiation perspective. Home monitoring devices, things for humidity, security, gardening, monitoring things. You can have solar powered things monitoring the humidity in your 17 plant pots, and your app will tell you that plant pot 18 needs or 17 needs more water or so. Lots of phone gadgets, and probably the saddest two examples still to date are the iPotty and the swipe and feed. Right, so you can plug your kid into an iPad while they're sitting on the potty, which I just thought was very sad. But this is the worst thing I've ever seen. As in, you know, you have a beautiful child where you only get to spend a few years with, right, really, and only a shorter period as infants. And so, yes, you have to get up late at night and sometimes feed them, and it's a privilege, but goodness forbid you might have a bonding experience. You can buy this contraption, slide your cell phone in it, rest it on their chest, and see if you're still popular on Facebook. Right, anyway, I couldn't think of anything more inappropriate, but anyway, that's the world. So also, of course, we got habits, sticking things in our pockets where they shouldn't be. And, you know, there's lots of women who have breast cancers related to the side where they used to keep their cell phone. Lots of people who have brain cancers, it's on the side that they're right or left-handed, as in, you know, where they used to hold their phone a lot, and so on. All right, moving on. So magnetic fields come from current, the flow of electricity. This is one of my favorite pictures. So we got a transmission line here in the background, and most people will go, ooh, not quite sure if I'd want to live here, right? And you're quite right. I mean, the magnetic field is predictably bad from transmission lines. Mind you, some of them are terribly wide-ranging, where other ones are not so bad. Measure, and you'll know, right? That's a good motto. But then here, we've got these local distribution lines, the little power lines in the street, as the layperson would call them. And most people would never look at those. And I can guarantee you, if you were a consultant and you go to houses, and of course, we don't go to the average house, right? We tend to go to houses where a lot of people are already sick. But you will deal with more houses that are plagued by magnetic fields because of these than those. Because these are basically at our doorstep, and they can be nicely in balance, and the magnetic field's not so bad, but they can be out of balance, and the magnetic field, especially in older suburbs, can be quite large. And of course, a lot of homes have their master bedroom at the front of the house. And so you'll be in a lot of homes where you have magnetic fields from this coming into the house. And again, actually on this trip of mine this week, or the last 3 weeks, I've seen a lot of that again. Okay, so anyway, in a short summary, we've got the power company making, electricity, goes through transformers, goes over the transmission lines, and they lower the voltage as it comes to the other end. That brings it on these local distribution lines. Then there's a transformer that brings it down to the voltage that we can use, and that brings us to our house. And then that basically the current goes back again. I mean, it's alternating current, so it goes sort of in both directions quickly, but we sort of, for simplification terms, just say the current goes in one direction and back to the power company. All right, so when current flows, that gives a magnetic field that spins around. There's a little trick on how to know where the magnetic field goes. We'll get into that. And so when you've got these overhead power cables, depending on the direction of the current, the magnetic field goes in a certain way. Now, when the current is equal, this magnetic field, when it bumps into each other, opposite magnetic fields, they help cancel each other out. And that's a bit of a bonus. So when we have underground cables and they're closer together, we get more of this canceling out effect, which is good. But these cables tend to be closer to the houses still. And so when they're not in balance, that can still produce very big problems. All right, electric fields then. So electric fields are caused by voltage. So think about that for a second. So look around the room, right? I mean, I'm sitting here, I've got computer running, got 2 monitors running, video lights running. I'm using electricity. So for that to happen, I need voltage, right? I need to be electricity available, and I need to use it. So that creates a flow of electricity, which is current. So I have the ingredients here to have magnetic fields, which doesn't happen so much in a house because all the cables are so nicely close together and the flow of electricity should be equal. So in a house, we don't tend to have magnetic fields unless there's something wrong with the wiring. But I have voltage around me. Now I could unplug all the all the cables that I have here, and then I wouldn't use any electricity in this room, or I could do them whole house, and then I wouldn't use any cent of electricity. But I would still have voltage everywhere. All the wires in the wall have voltage on it. Electricity is available. And that's enough for electric fields. And electric fields come out about 2 meters, 2.5 meters. And they do that at the frequency of your electrical system, which is 50 hertz or 60 hertz, depending on where you are in the world. And so this field just comes in and out and in and out and in and out. And so in a bedroom environment, we're very interested in that. And so we want to assess the body for whatever we can assess the body for. So for electric fields and radio frequency radiation, you can assess the body instead of the air, which is far more interesting, far more telling. And so we ask our client to lie in the bed, and then we have a look at what their exposure is by basically making contact with their foot. Right. This also shows them that this electric field is going through them, their whole bodies, and it's behind them in the walls mostly. And so we demonstrate, look, it's on your feet as well. It just doesn't leave you alone. Okay, so there's a few solutions for electric field. Shielded cable is fantastic. In some states in America, around Chicago, that's actually standard, as in all houses have that, which is great. I'm sure they didn't do it for radiation issues though. It's arguably safer for if you're drilling in the wall. But yeah, so when we're building new houses, which is my passion, it's great to use shielded cable, although it is a bit thicker and a bit more work to put it in. And there's other solutions for electric fields, but this is a great one. All right, and then there's dirty electricity. Dirty electricity refers to basically noise sitting on the electricity we have in the cables in our house. So electricity has a sine wave, goes in, goes out, goes in, goes out. That's basically the alternating current. And when this line is corrupted, it starts getting, let's say, jagged. And then this also starts throwing a signal into the space. Now, there's meters you can use to ascertain what value that has in the wall. But us and also other people in our industry, we sort of also argue, well, hang on a second. It's nice you plug it into the wall to ascertain what the value is. But if it comes into the space, we should be able to measure it in the space. And you don't often necessarily get really high readings in the space. So this might be a little bit amplified or exaggerated in terms of what the importance of it is. We recognize it's there. If the levels are high, then of course you want to do something about it. But concentrate on the basics is what we often keep focusing on. If you deal with the electric fields, which of course dealing with dirty electricity, which they have filters for, that completely ignores electric fields. So, if you deal with electric fields and you turn circuits off that are giving us this exposure, and of course, there's no dirty electricity there either. Anyway, sources of dirty electricity are things like solar panels, sadly, inverters, energy saver light bulbs, wind farming. So sadly, a lot of stuff that are good for the environment are not necessarily good for our environment. Okay. All right. So in terms of solutions, well, there's avoidance. Try not to be exposed, but it's certainly hard with cell phone towers and wiring. Elimination. So we have a problem. Now we take care of it. It's no longer there. So the cutoff switches that we use is a great idea. They can cut the power to a circuit when not required, especially at night. And then shielding. Nothing wrong with shielding either. So we can shield the room against radio frequency radiation, and we can also shield a space against electric fields as well, which is great when in existing houses and the wiring is all over the place. 2 days ago, I was in Canberra, and there was a client there who had their circuit breaker panel outside their bedrooms. And so, yeah, it doesn't matter what you do with most of those switches, you still got the supply cable coming to that panel, and that always has voltage on it. So, yeah. Sometimes you need to resort back to shielding for that, and it's also no problem. When you shield against radio frequency radiation, you're essentially making a Faraday's cage, walls and ceiling, basically box yourself in to keep all the radiation from all directions out and get the body level as low as possible. Shielding against electric fields, you can do that with the T98 shielding paint or the GPA mesh when it's grounded, and that takes the electric fields away before they get to the body. Okay, we'll go into this, but there's some unit of measurements which you should get familiar with, especially these, as in what makes things smaller. So if somebody talks to you about a milliwatt, right, and you want to know what that is in microwatts, then you know it's a step of 1,000, 3 zeros in between. We'll get into that later. Cool. So here are some exposure guidelines that, for magnetic fields, for example, in most countries, they're set very, very high. This is the World Health Organization making a very careful statement about what maybe they should be. Keep in mind that the World Health Organization is funded by governments. And so there's also a lot of politics there. You can listen to retired directors of the World Health Organization. They tend to have a bit more vocal opinion about radiation than before they were retired. So in terms of magnetic fields, we would like to see 0.3 milligauss in a bedroom, ideally, or in nanoteslas, which is often European meters measure in nanoteslas. That equals 30. So that's what we're after. Our colleagues at Building Biology, of which I'm also a lifetime member, they have a different sort of scale, which is also interesting. So they say, between 0.2 and 1 milligauss is slight concern. 1 to 5 is severe concern, and above 5, extreme concern. The idea between these terms, which is kind of a cool idea, is that if it's extreme concern, anybody should be removing themselves from that environment, right? Severe concern is if you are sensitive to radiation, you should immediately remove yourself from the situation. If you're not sensitive to radiation, then you should move away from the situation at some point in the future, basically, as in the urgency is less. And then if it's slight concern, well, if you're sensitive to radiation, then you should move away from this at some point in the future, as in, the urgency is still there, but less. And if you're not sensitive to radiation, then, urgency is less so, let's say. So interesting sort of take on the same thing, but the punchline is that we're basically recommending similar sort of values. All right, so with electric fields, we assess that on the body. That does inflate our numbers. So 30 volts per meter actually sounds like a lot, but because we touch the body, those numbers always inflate. So we're after 30 volts per meters on the body or less. And so if you take a body voltage reading with a multimeter, then you do that in millivolts. And then these are the numbers that you're sort of chasing. And field strength potential free, which basically means you put the meter there and then you step back. Then 0.3 volts per meter is where slight concern already start. So in these sessions, and goodness, you're all still here, I'm very pleased. in these sessions, I'm also going to cover some amateur meters for you. I respect the fact that, you know, not all of you will end up being consultants, although that would be awesome. So we're going to cover some amateur meters as well to make sure that you actually know what you're looking at. So if you've got a TF2, which is sort of one of my favorite amateur meters, if you hold that on electric fields, you might have noticed the numbers go up. And when you put it on the table, the numbers go down. Right? Your body is already a part of it. So, you know, if you put the meter down and you step away from it, then you're removing you from the picture, which we would argue, well, that's exactly what you don't want to do. It's about you. We want to see what happens to you. But just to highlight that some of these meters, they're wonderful, but they don't have the sensitivity to show you what you need. The TF2, for example, can indicate 0 or 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. There's no decimal point for volts per meters. So if it indicates anything more than 1, we would already want to mitigate it, right? So, but the consumer looks at the meter and goes 0, 1, oh, pretty low number, must be okay then, right? You got to know what the numbers mean. And we'll get into that. Cool. Then radio frequency radiation. So when we assess the body, we do that with the HF field probe, which is quite a little famous meter, which has sort of come from a whole heritage of other meters that we use. We first had the Hengstenberg device, which is, you can't see it standing behind me in a little dome. We had this EMF SPY, also able to assess the body. And they sort of all went out of production. We were forced to make our own meter, which was incredibly costly. Using gold componentry on the inside because we're measuring higher than 2.5 gigahertz, and you've got to use gold componentry to do that properly. And so it's all done properly. And so this allows us to assess what the body's absorbing. We all know the body's an antenna. If we're old enough and we remember the tube television with the bunny ear antennas on the top, right? If you had a bad picture, you'd send somebody over to adjust the bunny ears, right? And as long as they were holding on to it, you had a great picture, right? And then would walk away and you go, oh, you'd laugh and you say, oh, keep standing there, keep holding on to it, right? Our body is an antenna. And so instead of using a little antenna in a meter or even, you know, a bigger one, we can actually assess what the body is absorbing. And that is far more interesting in our experience to see if the body's under stress, given that we're an electrical being. And secondly, to verify if shielding is, you know, achieved as much as we would like it to. And in, you know, both accounts, an air measurement can, in our experience, sort of gives us misleading information. So that's why we hardly look at the air. We look at the body. That's what we're interested in. Anyway, so with radio frequency radiation in the air, we could use this as a sort of indicating scale. So again, if you have an amateur meter already and it's indicating numbers to you, right, you got to know what these numbers mean. So it's interesting to point out that 10 microwatts per square meter, right, is where severe exposure begins. So if your meter, like a TF2, indicates milliwatts per square meter, you have to divide that through 1,000 or to multiply it by 1,000 to get microwatts. So if it indicates, if a TF2, this thing, if that indicates 0.01, that's where severe exposure begins, right? Most people go, ooh, nice low number, right? You got to know what the numbers mean. Cool. Anyway, so this sort of brings us to the end. So yeah, just a little plug for the work we do, I guess. We'd love you to sort of become part of the team if this stuff all excites you. And I'm very happy for you to be here and learn stuff that you use for yourself. I actually had a little poll to ask, but I think I need to, oh, hang on, I can. Does this work? Launch. Can you guys see a poll now? I think so. Anyway, have a look. Little poll asking what your primary motivation is for being here, which I'd love to know. We get a lot of people in our courses with different interests, as in people that want to, they have health issues, they want to help themselves. You might be in the category. We get people that we have helped. We've helped them mitigate their house. They've gotten over health issues, and now they're just curious. They want to know how it works, and so they come and do the training as well. And then there's people that are interested, say, hey, I might be able to help other people with this. This could be a side business or a business that I could help my community with. And so that's another sort of typical category. So I'd love you to tick one of the boxes in the poll, so we sort of have an idea of what you guys are. I can sort of see if I need to tailor my what I'm sharing with you. Anyway, you could work with us. We have very detailed online training. We do home assessments basically via Zoom as practice that we can do when people have got their meters. They can do an assessment of their own house, and we sit there for 2.5 hours watching them execute an assessment. So we've got quite clever teaching online, actually before COVID already, but COVID helped us even fine-tune that even more. Just by doing that, you can work with us as an associate, as we call that, or a freelancer. You have access to a very well thought out line of solutions designed with a holistic approach to health, which I honestly don't think anybody else does. High performance, logical solutions designed for health, not for price point. Yeah, sometimes things end up a little bit more costly, but yeah, it's a bit like open heart surgery, right? If you needed that, you can go to some forest in the middle of Africa. You could probably get open heart surgery there, but would you really want to, right? I mean, a lot of this stuff you invested for the price of a year's supply of supplements. For some people, you've already got your bedroom shielded with the best stuff, or very well designed stuff that you can get. So we just keep trying to do the right thing by the clients, and then our reputation will do the rest. We have a distinct dislike for online shops. We think that our consultants should do a great job assessing people's homes, then be available for them to ask questions. And so, online shops just take $5 off the price and sort of make sales that way, and that doesn't really help our consultants. We want them to be enthusiastic and delighted to answer people's questions. And so it's important to make a little bit of money when somebody buys some products. You can also be a GeoVital consultant, which is sort of an internal term. For that, you have to attend in-person training, which we do in Austria, Melbourne, Vancouver in June, and as in this coming year in June, and very soon Asia as well. And so there we actually go and assess houses. And as far as I know, I teach the only courses in the world that actually take you to a house, which is a bit odd when you think about it, right? This is what you end up doing. Why isn't anybody showing you this? You can be taken to a bedroom with some power cables on the floor and try and do some testing, but it's not a house. So we actually do that. We go and run around, do 4, 5, 6 houses, and we teach you about geopathic stress, which is a hands-on skill. I can only teach you that in person. So that's our live workshop, which is called EMF 3. Okay, as a consultant, you can get a profile on the GeoVital website, and you become the highest priority for us to refer people to you, because you have all our abilities to cover those 3 areas: electronic pollution and geopathic stress, and then the mattresses, of course, that all our people can do. Cool. I think that sums it up. All right. So, of course, I'm not monitoring you per se as students, but I'm sort of giving you some things to do. And so you can do this for yourself. I would encourage you to do those. Piece of homework is this link. I'll put it in chat. Oh, yeah, it stopped up. No, I have to pause it, I think. Oh, hang on. Does this work? No, it doesn't work. I'll try and copy that in chat in a minute, which takes you to a video which explains the background of GeoVital. A very interesting watch. Then, as in sort of homework to do, make some photos that are EMF related of yourself. So maybe you standing next to a smart meter or near a phone tower or a transmission line. Doesn't matter that you're not holding any instruments if you don't have them. If you only have amateur meters, I'd even not use them. It's about you and it's about the subject. So it's something you could use on a website maybe later. So you could stand somewhere near a bank of smart meters with your arms crossed, and that already conveys a message. Wear a nice shirt and so on. I do need to also ask you for some assistance. As I mentioned at the beginning, I get enthused by having this group of people grow and continue to come. When numbers are stable, that's nice. But when numbers keep growing, it spurs me on to share even more. Over the last year, it's become painfully obvious that we are being censored when it comes to all your search engines that actually are run by companies wanting to make a profit. Google, Facebook, YouTube, we are now getting half the exposure that we used to. And so if you're here, then obviously you're interested in doing something about something that is accepted to be perfectly acceptable. And you're sort of trying to stand up for what's right and trying to help people that are exposed to this stuff, which is really unfair. I need you to start realizing that the pathways amongst, the world culture has now learned to get information from, as in a Google search engine, a Facebook for, communicating with people. They're not getting the information anymore that you were able to get there, as in the results can be altered. We've seen, videos of YouTube actually saying, well, when we don't like content, we'll make sure it doesn't turn up anymore. They are a commercial platform, and we can really feel that at the moment. So we will go back more to old-fashioned type of communication, advertising, newspapers, magazines, and those sorts of things. Focus more on a newsletter to try and get in contact with people. I'll maybe Alan, if you can, on our website, there's a link to get onto our newsletter. We'd love you to register on there. But more importantly, for this event, I need you to share this with other people. And so this link here, which I'll give to you in a minute. I don't know if you can click on it on screen. I guess not. Maybe if I click there, oh, hang on. This might work. Cool. I think I've got it. Chat to everyone. All right, this link I've just given in chat, that takes you to the page where you probably have been also to register for this event. Please share that with your friends. Put it in groups on Facebook. We can't put it there because it's self-promotion, but if you think this was valuable, and we've only really started, please share it with people. Make them aware that this is on and they can come to us. All right, cool. So I think we'll leave it at that in terms of me. This went way too long, and I was wanting to. The sun's up now, as you can tell. All right, let's see what we've got in the Q&A. If you've got any questions, please put those in Q&A now. Okay, Marius asked if we have any proper training for the use of the NFA 1000. The NFA 1000 is a gorgeous Gauss meter that Gigahertz Solutions makes. I have one myself. It's very nice. It's lots of features. I think it's, for the way we assess homes, it's a little bit overkill, as in electric fields. We just don't use that on there because we want to assess the body. So I think the NFA 30 is much better value, even though also very costly. Not necessarily great to start off with. But anyway, that's a different story. We'll go with that normally in our courses. In the courses, in the online course, EMF 1, we have an online knowledge center where we have videos that you learn from, and then you go, once a week, we have an online Zoom meeting like this. Well, you can see everybody, and we discuss the most important points, and questions are answered and so on. And then we concentrate on the next chunk of information for the next week. And so we do that for 5 weeks and go through all this information that I'm sharing a lot of with you now. This online knowledge center has within it a number of training videos about how to use meters, also amateur meters, which are normally sort of amateur courses that I have available on Teachable for other people. The NFA 1000 is also covered in there, but honestly not in full blown, sort of showing all the details. So there's a little bit of information that you'll get in the online knowledge center of that. Okay, so thank you for that, Marius. Let me have a quick look. Okay, Austin's got a great question. You're welcome, Cynthia. Oh, sorry, I see some questions coming in the chat as well. Okay, just if you've got questions, please put them in the Q&A, then they all stay together. I see Cynthia. Okay, Cynthia, let me get to that in a minute. Sorry, I'm trying to answer you in time, sort of a thing. So Austin asked, are there any short-term solutions for reducing electric and magnetic field exposure in the bedroom? For instance, flipping off circuit breakers, you go to the bedroom, reduce the fields considerably enough to make a difference, or would voltage or current still be into the bedrooms? Okay, so so a few things in relation to flicking off circuits. First thing to know is that there's often more circuits involved in your bedroom than you think. You would think it's the one that feeds the power outlets and your lighting, but often there's other circuits in addition to that. We've seen this in Germany a lot, where these cutoff switches, they're sold by some electricians because it's a health thing. So the electrician comes in, fixes whatever you ask them to come for, and they say, oh, we have these cutoff switches, Netzfreischalter, they're called over there. I could install one for you if you like, because they're good for you, sort of a thing. And then the client goes, oh yeah, I've heard about them. All right, install one of those whilst you're here. And so they install one of the switches on, let's say, the power circuit, or maybe power and light, but there's other circuits involved. Anyway, in 95% of cases where the electrician sold the cutoff switch, the people are still sleeping in excessive electric fields, despite having that installed, because the electrician doesn't have the ability to investigate properly. So you would have to turn off all circuits. And then even then, in some houses, like the house I was in 2 days ago, even with all the circuits off, we still had electric field exposure higher than we wanted it to be, because the supply cable, well, I'm not clairvoyant either, I can't look in the wall, but it makes sense that the supply cable to the circuit breaker panel was still bothering us in the bedrooms because of its proximity of the circuit breaker panel. So punchline is, without assessing it properly, there's a good chance that you don't know what to turn off. You could turn everything off, but even then it might not be enough. That's why you need to investigate. The second thing I really need to impress upon you is that circuit breakers are not designed to be turned off every day. You know, as in they're an emergency device that's supposed to respond to something at an instant. Sometimes you need to test them, sometimes you need to turn them off, that's fine. But if you get in the habit of turning circuit breakers off every night and on every morning, they get an enormous amount more wear, and they may not function in the future when they actually need to do their job. They're not made for that. So you have to stress that upon you. So yeah, are there short-term things that you can do real quick? Well, not really. You can certainly unplug whatever you've got in your bedroom. That can reduce it a little bit, but the wiring in your wall is often still excessive. You can certainly turn your Wi-Fi off at night. Really, you shouldn't have Wi-Fi at all, but that seems very difficult for people. So turn your Wi-Fi off at least at night. Any wireless devices, turn them off. Be careful of game computers. They tend to have a lot of Wi-Fi action going on, even when you think they're off, but they're plugged in and they're still using lots of stuff. And yeah, your phone, of course, needs to be on flight mode. You need to check the settings that, you know, Bluetooth isn't on, Wi-Fi isn't on, your location services are off. And then even then, you don't want it within easy reach. You know, you want it at an arm's length. All right, so with magnetic fields, yeah, if that's the case, then there's not an awful lot of you can do until you got that figured out. If it comes from outside, as in local distribution lines, you got no hope really. That just comes in without your without having an, you know, you can't really do much about it. The only the only good bit of news that sometimes helps is that there is a diurnal cycle, a 24-hour cycle to magnetic fields, as in there's a 24-hour cycle to the usage of electricity. And so the usage of electricity varies throughout the day. So typically you have the lowest exposure from 10 o'clock at night till 7 in the morning. Then from 7 in the morning till about 3 in the afternoon, you have medium exposure. Then 3 o'clock until 10 o'clock, you get high exposure. People come home, turn the heater or the air conditioning on, start using computers and television and so on. So if you're measuring something in your house and you have magnetic fields that you're not really happy with, if they're not astronomically high, there's a good chance that at night they might be almost acceptable or acceptable. So you could sacrifice a couple of nights to sort of wake up every now and then and see what the levels are, or have a piece of paper that if you come home late at night or you wake up early, you have a look at your meter. What's the exposure then? So you can sort of try and put the pieces of the puzzle together. Thanks for that, Austin. All right, then in time, Cynthia was next. We were talking about shielded clothing. Does any of it work? All right, so I wasn't really going to talk about it in these sessions. And really, I shouldn't talk about it here either, because I don't want to sort of badmouth other things. But how do I do this tactfully? Let me look up a video for you. Give me a second. YouTube. This video is a little bit controversial, but I think it hits the nail on the head. GEOVITAL, air, and the word body. That normally brings it up. There it is. Okay, chat to everyone. No, didn't copy. Sorry.
Hey, I'm Joey.
Yeah. Copy, try again, paste, here, body. All right, so there's a video now in chat that shows you one of our students. This was when we were doing a classic course, which we still teach. And by the way, is the cheapest way to actually get trained with us. We do that in Austria only now because the other training options have sort of taken over. But in July, we're doing that again in Austria. In this training, Tariq, who's a really funny guy, it's a funny video. Tariq turns up from the United Arab Emirates. He got a gym bag full of stuff that he wanted us to look at. And he was so excited. This video is like the first coffee break on the first day, as in we're going to cover all this stuff, but he's so excited we can't shut him up anymore. Anyway, so Sasha explains why we're interested in assessing the body, not the air. And so Tariq goes onto our balcony and he has a very qualitative but air measuring meter in his hands. And he's boasting on the balcony that you see, I might exaggerate a little bit, but I'm not. He says, you see this level over here? I have at my house very low levels just like this, you know. And anyway, he's all excited that the levels on our balcony, according to his meter, are nice and low, just what he has in his bedroom at home. Right. Then we bring out the Hengstenberg meter because the HF field probe didn't exist yet. And so we allow him to assess his body, and those levels are still high, so he's all confused, right? There's one meter that says, you're perfectly fine, don't worry about it. This is as good as your bedroom. And you get one meter that says, your body's still under stress, you should be shielding. And so then he opens his gym bag and he starts to put on shielded clothing. Now, some people use this and they get a benefit from it. Of course, just like the phone pouches that we have, if you've got an object, let's say a phone in your pocket, and you get shielded fabric on the other side of it, that reduces your exposure, direct impact. But your body is still taking on that frequency. If you're holding the phone, your body's still taking that on, right? And so you have shielded clothing and your face is still sticking out, or your legs are still sticking out, your feet are still sticking out. The body value doesn't change much, if anything. And you'll see that in this video. So anyway, the punchline is that Some people can get some relief with it. We don't really support it or sort of recommend it. Sort of goes back again that if you're going to invest any money on this whole subject, you should be investing that in your bedroom, because you're going to get the biggest bang out of your buck from getting that done properly. So I guess that's what I can tell you. Thanks for that question. Just trying to keep this in order. Thanks for putting the questions in. Deondra, that sounds fantastic. If I pronounce it right. Put the video link here or in chat. I'm hoping that's the video I was talking about before. Okay, what have I got next? Mary, does GeoVital focus on dirty electricity mitigation? As I mentioned in the presentation, we recognize it's there. When the levels are really high, you have to deal with it, of course. But it does seem, and we're not the only ones that sort of sing this song, that at the low levels, where typically, let's say, the people that make filters say, buy filters, buy filters, buy filters, buy filters, at those levels and a fair bit above that, we can't find it in the space. As in, you bring expensive instrumentation and you measure in the space where supposedly that radiation gets you, it hardly turns up. So it seemed to be not as important as marketed. So we don't ignore it. We don't say it's not a problem, but the levels at where we need to action it is probably not as high as thought. But what we do is focus on electric fields. And so it's dealing with electric fields, you want to reduce that exposure. And so when you do that, you also reduce your exposure to dirty electricity. So you sort of deal with that thing at the same time. Thank you, Cynthia. Appreciate it if you could share it with others. That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Cynthia asks how to copy from the chat. I think if you select the window of chat itself, then your pointer turns into the little hand thing. And then if you go over the link, and then if you right click on it, oh, there's no copy. That's weird. Okay, well, then the easiest thing is just click on the link. That'll open your browser with the website open, and then you just copy the link in your browser window and share that with people. Thank you so much for asking. Okay. So I'm just reading some of the questions. Yeah, so just further on that shielded clothing idea, if it's magnetic fields, which is what you get from power lines that Cynthia was mentioning in a question, that wouldn't work against that at all, because magnetic fields go through everything. You can't, we'll get into that, but you can't really shield against magnetic fields. I mean, there is a material, it's called mu metal, MU metal. It's insane expensive, but you could line an entire room with it. They do that in hospitals and MRI rooms. But it's impractical and very expensive in a residential setting. And as soon as you leave a gap for your window and your door, the results are often disappointing. So you can't really deal with magnetic fields. So again, same thing, fix the bedroom. You'll hear me say this a lot. This is what matters most. If you've got that bedroom sorted out and you have actually a good sleep, and I would argue you probably haven't had a good night's sleep maybe your whole life, right? Because when you were born, you had electricity in where your crib was, right? I mean, not so. I mean, depending how old you are, older houses didn't have that much wiring in it as they do now. But every night we have this irritation going on. And so, to actually get sleep and let your body do what it can do and work optimally, that's very empowering. And so if then you go for a walk and there's power lines, I mean, you might be conscious of them, but you don't have to, let's say, worry about them so much. we deal with people that fly jets, as in, you know, airline captains, that sort of stuff. We don't go and fix their plane. We go to their bedroom and fix that. And that helps them with their daytime exposure. Okay, cool. I see Alan's working on that one. Okay, cool. Then I think we sort of got it all covered. That's awesome. How many people, where are we? Great, you're all still here. This is really exciting. Really, it's awesome. It really spurs me on. All right, so just about that poll that we did earlier, not quite sure if you can see the results on that. It's been a while since I used these webinar settings, but we have 35% people in the room that want to help themselves, or let's say immediate family. We have 10% of the people in the room that we have helped, or, you know, had their home mitigated. They feel better now and they want to know how it works. So we've got 10% of people in the room that fall in that category. The 55% of you, you know, would like to possibly offer home assessment services, you know, to other people. Great, cool. So we're a nice mix, sort of fits with what we normally see in classes. Thank you, Khalid. Thank you for saying that. Cool. All right. Well, I think that that sums it all up for now. Sorry, we've gone a little bit long. This will be a lot shorter next time. Maybe we'll do little 10-15-minute sessions, which people commented. It's actually sort of nice. So it's not such a big commitment every time. Just a little get together, have a quick chat, give you some information, and then we move on. Cool. All right. Thank you, Martin. Appreciate it. Oh, cool. Martin actually did training with us. Thank you, Rosemary. Appreciate it. Mary, thank you. Cynthia. Okay, cool. Yeah, there's lots of stuff going on there. All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it. I'll leave the I'll turn my camera off and so on. I'll leave the chat open for a couple of minutes should you want to put something there. Thanks, Claudia. Much appreciated. Look forward to seeing you all next week, same time. I don't think, or no, we've just had it. No, have we? Oh, I'm confused. If there's summer winter time changes, our starting time may change. If we've just had one, haven't we? I get confused. Anyway, you get a reminder from Zoom a day before and an hour before we start. So please keep an eye on those. And yeah, please share the registration page with others so we can keep this growing and going. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Fantastic you're here. And let's make the world a better place, one hour at a time. Thanks, Alan, for assisting. And see you all next week. Bye.